the NLP founders and all the co-developers who were mostly based in California.
I was dating John Grinder. I came to NLP because I fell in love. I have to be honest. Well, teach me how to do the pattern and I'll tell you what it is. It is a model about the models.
A warm welcome to Judith DeLozier, and lovingly I call her Judy. She's my trainer and mentor, and I'm so delighted to host you for this conversation. And the reason for this conversation is uh, for the NLP community that I have, and so this is going to be for them uh, just to hear directly from you, and there will be lots of exciting things I'm sure you have to tell.
I'm
And
hoping.
I generally get a lot of questions about NLP from our participants as well. So I have some of the questions written down here. I'm going to ask you those questions as well as we move on. Since this is going to be on YouTube as well, I'm not sure who will listen to this, and I'm sure a lot of people who are interested in NLP. And hence, I'm going to read your bio first so that they are excited to hear some of the NLP stories from you as well. So, just to make sure that I read it, I'm going to read it directly from what I have here. And this is so that I read everything about you. So, here we are. So, Judith DeLozier has been a trainer, co developer, and designer of training programs in the field of neuro linguistic programming since 1975. A member of Grinder and Bandler's original group of students, Judith has made fundamental contributions to the development of numerous NLP models and processes. A co-author of Neuro Linguistic Programming Volume 1 with Robert Dilts, John Grinder, and Richard Bandler. Judith was involved in the creation of the fundamental NLP technique of reframing. A student of Milton Erickson, Judith modeled his tracking strategy for creating and utilizing trance states and metaphors. This work is described in Patterns of the Hypnotic Techniques of Milton H. Erickson, Volume 2, which he co authored with John and Richard. In the book Turtles All the Way Down Prerequisites to Personal Genius, which she co authored with John, Judith explored the interrelationships between NLP and the threads of culture, community, art, aesthetics, and epistemology. The result of this work was the creation of NLP New Coding, which stimulated a movement towards a more systemic and relational approach to NLP, and a resurgence of interest in the work of Gregory Bateson. In addition to the development of perceptual positions, which has become one of the fundamental distinctions of NLP, Judith's contribution to NLP new coding include attention training and the relationship between conscious and unconscious processes. Finally, the Encyclopedia of Systemic NLP and New Coding provides a comprehensive overview of the field of NLP, including its wide range of application techniques and influences, which was written by Judith and Robert Dilts together. Judith has been responsible for bringing NLP to the area of transcultural competence, pioneering the applications of NLP to the development of cross-cultural skills. Judith's background in the ballet and Congolese dance has led her to promote the use of dance and movement as a primary tool of NLP. One manifestation of this was the development of the dancing score technique, one of my favorite techniques, which I use in coaching and in NLP Master Track. Uh, Another is the creation with Robert Dills of the processes of somatic syntax, again, one of my favorites.
Me too.
Judith holds a MA degree in religious studies and a bachelor's degree in anthropology and religious studies from the University of California at Santa Cruz, where she met Grinder and Bandler. She has taught NLP all over the world, including Europe, Asia, Indonesia, Australia, Mexico, Central America, Canada, US, and the Indians from last few years, and was president of Grinder DeLozier and Associates and DeLozier and Associates for approximately 14 years. She is presently an associate of NLP University with Robert Dills.
You just
Now
forgot
that's
to mention goddess of NLP.
well, yes, that's the official bio, and the
The official.
non-official bio is Judith is the mother of NLP and the goddess of NLP when it comes to the first lady of NLP. And
Thank
the most interesting definition and the most curious definition and the most playful definition I would have ever uh, heard about NLP is not neuro-linguistic programming. It's now let's play.
or now let's pray. Depending. So thank you so much for inviting me. It feels really good to say welcome to my home to everybody who might be watching this little video, and I hope that you are inspired and enjoy the process. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to asking these questions.
For me as well. For me as well.
And here's the question which is most often asked by NLP practitioners, NLP master practitioners, and those who are exploring NLP as a topic.
Yeah.
So the question is, there are many stories and rumors surrounding NLP, and it always has been. Today we are likely to hear directly from the source. How did NLP come into picture? Who were the founders and other developers who were involved in the experiments that finally led to NLP?
Well, I've been answering this question my whole life. Let me say that first. This is definitely, I have the same experience. Let me preface my comments or my answer by saying, this is going to be from my perspective. And as Gregory Bateson would say, if there's really a kernel of truth and a big paranoia, it's going to come out of multiple perspectives. So let me share mine. The beginning of NLP was punctuated sort of officially 50 years ago this year in 1974 with the book Structure of Magic. The Structure of Magic came out through science behavior books, and it had two authors on it, John Grinder and Richard Bandler. Now, that punctuated the history. Robert and I sort of made that a possibility because we had a big reunion, 40-year anniversary, punctuated by the date of, the publishing of that book. However, when when I met John at the University of California, Santa Cruz, John Grinder, he gave me the book in a manuscript form. It had not been published yet, nor did NLP actually have an official name. It wasn't named yet. And at this time, I was only be coming onto the scene. I was dating John Grinder. I came to NLP because I fell in love. I have to be honest. And he says, "Here, would you read this book for me?" And I go, "Okay," So at that time, he and Richard had just finished that book. Before that time, Frank Puslik and Richard Bandler had a relationship. I know that they were doing groups at the medical center at the university in a spare room at the little medical center that's on campus. And that Richard at that time was going through the videotapes of not Feldenkrais, oh gosh, I can't think of his name in the moment. Not Feldenkrais, but Gestalt guy.
It's well,
Thank you, Mr. Fritz Perls. Right. So Richard was going through these tapes I think to create a product for science behavior books. And he happened to notice that there was some kind of patterning in the language that Fritz Perls was using particular linguistic forms and questions that Richard went, "There's a pattern here, but I can't get the pattern. I'm going to go to a linguist." So he goes to John Grinder. John Grinder goes, "Well, teach me how to do the pattern and I'll tell you what it is." And that became, basically the patterns that came out in the Structure of Magic, which were the verbal patterns, the meta model patterns. And at that time, there was Steve Gilligan was around. David Gordon was part of that group. Frank Puslik was a part of that group. Leslie Cameron was a part of that group. Slightly later, myself, Robert Dilts, so many others, I couldn't even describe them all. And I can remember coming home, they would meet up in the house that I lived in and have these groups. And I wasn't exactly in those groups. And I would be working at night, doing my job, trying to go through, pay for university. And, you know, I'd come home and there would be these amazing things going on. There might be 40 people sitting in the living room on the floor, and John and Richard would be creating little experiments. Maybe go by and give somebody a card that says, who's the visual person in the group, and then they try to figure out, and then how did you know that? Trying to figure out eye accessing patterns, right? What's the relationship between the inner event and this movement on the outside? So there were many, many people involved. I think it got punctuated with John and Richard because it was punctuated from that book. I hope that touches on the answer. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's my perspective. And, maybe John would have a different one, Richard would have a different one, Frank would have, Leslie, David Gordon, Robert, everybody might have a slightly, different perspective, but that's my memory. Every history has a prehistory, and I can sort of kind of speculate and guess on some of the prehistory, but I can talk about when I stepped onto the path. So,
Hmm,
yeah.
hmm. Thank you for sharing, this answer with the audience and with me as well, even though I have heard this a number of times. Question number two that I have here is almost connected to the first question. And this is something that I've read from different books of NLP, which are written by Robert, John, and the other developers as well. Uh, so from that, I've just, you know, embedded some of the structure of the question into the question itself so that it sort of becomes the pre-framing to the question. So I'll just read that question. Uh, NLP has such a rich expression of uh, humanistic psychology, cognitive psychology, Gestalt psychology, family systems, Ericksonian hypnotherapy, anthropology, pragmatic psychology. Still, there are numerous misconceptions surrounding NLP, always have been. Some are even equating it to pseudoscience or quantum physics on the internet. As a co-developer of NLP, what's your perspective on this and where it could have been a bit better from the co-founders or the co-developers?
This is a really delicious question in a way. And I have to really I have to look at all of those traditions that you described, whether it's, family systems or systems therapy, or whether it's cognitive therapy, et cetera, Gestalt therapy. They're like silos, right? They're like silos. Yet all of them are describing and trying to touch the human experience with
Mm,
respect to change and the process of transition, et cetera, et cetera. They all involve different aspects. I mean, I noticed that you didn't mention somatic psychotherapy, for example, right? Which would be in a way, another silo. The interesting thing about NLP, and I believe, most of those that you described are coming out of, psychoanalytic traditions going back, Freud, Jung, maybe even Erickson, with briefer therapy. So there's sort of a history of that's all focused in one direction and different descriptions of parts of that. Now, the interesting thing for me about NLP, and again, I can only say it from my perspective, is that it is a model about the models. It's a model that's coming not from that tradition, but from cybernetics, Ashby, from Bateson as a philosopher and an anthropologist. It's coming from language, through transformational grammar. So in a way, it went, let's look at this whole art of change, of transition from the perspective of the nervous system. Let's
Interesting.
go,
Yeah.
yeah. So we have this nervous system that starts up here in a thing called the brain, and it goes down the spinal cord, and then it goes to the whole part of the body. So we are one big brain in a way because of the nervous system. The brain doesn't stop at the neck. And then how does that influence language, and how does our experience influence that deeper structure? So it really, for me, was about going, let's look at all these models that are kind of in silos, and some of them going, hey, I have the right map, and another one, oh, I have the right map, and go, there's just no right maps. There are maps, and some of them work better for different things. So, one size doesn't necessarily fit all. But NLP, I think, because it's a meta model, it's a model about models, is to go, how are they the same? What are the similar patterns that run through all these silos, all these ideas, all these descriptions? And where are the tensions? Where do they not agree? Because those places are places to really fall into and go, there's something to model here. There's something interesting here in this map. So that's personally how I think about it.
Okay. Thank you for sharing this.
Think about that. I was curious about what you think. Because I thought it was a juicy freaking question,
So the question generally came from when I was curious about the history of NLP, and I sort of read from different books written by all the founders and co-developers, and it just touched upon these words, and
Okay.
so it touched upon these words, and it gave a rich background about what was going on before
Aha.
the NLP started, before Richard started transcribing the Gestalt tapes, and what else was searched and sourced while all the experiments were happening.
Got it. Okay, here's something that I think I thank you for that, because one of the things that I think happened was, and this is again, from my perspective, is that those first models, the first three models, let's say the first three big ones, Milton and Fritz Perls through the tapes, and Virginia Satir, they were all therapeutic models.
Hmm.
They were all people who were excellent at what they did. And they were also people who were pioneering. They were pushing the edges of what was okay. They were really playing on the edge. So Todd Epstein used to say, oh, it was, two outlaws modeling three loners. you know. But I think because because those were the first models, that there's sort of an ambiguity got created that this is about therapy, or this is yeah. And I think there was that sort of interesting ambiguity that was created when, I think, if I remember correctly, this is about building models of excellence and passing those models on. So, you know, whether it's therapeutic in the sense that I'm focused on the past and trauma or pain, or just, releasing positive energy from the past, or I switch my focus over here to where I'm going, you know, it's going to just address the human condition, no matter how we describe it.
And while you were speaking about this, this is such an important points in the development of NLP. Maybe 50 years back, when internet was not there, social media was not there, uh, things could not be sent from one place to another for people to understand, for people to know. And maybe that was one of the reasons that the NLP founders and all the co-developers, who were mostly based in California, uh, couldn't do justice to the great, the methodology which was being created when nothing else pretty much was there,
Yeah.
which included coaching as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when I think back, who showed up mostly at those very, very, very early programs were psychiatrists and psychologists. And they would come out of school with incredible amounts of information about and theories, but very little tools, very little
Mm,
real practical tools. So I think that idea was going, if we model this group of people, here's Milton Erickson, who really talks about this, generative connection with with the creative unconscious as a way to bring our whole system present. Here's Mr. Fritz Perls, who is able to ask these sit there with his cigarette, with his ash falling all over him, asking these very important questions, right? Or
right.
Virginia Satir, who's taking a family and taking each member of that family and putting them in her body and feeling that suffering, and knowing that she's finished by working that suffering out of herself, as sort of a metaphor for healing this family. To go, these people all represent, top of the line capabilities and beliefs and values, and can we model some of that and bring those tools to other professionals? And that's really kind of, I don't know if I thought that at the time, but when I think back, I
Mm,
go, that's who showed up. And then amazing schools came out of that. This is that first real generation of people who were there at the very beginning and the very first practitioners ever done, people like Ann Ennis, who was teaching at McGill University, a doctorate at McGill University, teaching there. New York City with Annie Linden, a big institute which is still there. PPD in London, which is still there. Um, uh, a couple, I can't think of their names just right in the moment, that had a big institute in LA. I mean, the Charlotte Barreto, um, Laura Amber Ewing, who we didn't even have a trainer training. The only way you become a trainer was to just be an apprentice. They just followed around, both of them creating really amazing institutes. And so I think that's a whole part of the history that sort of doesn't necessarily get talked about, and how many of those institutes are still viable and in various parts of the world. And it's one of my biggest joys, is to support those next generations in creating their dreams and having them come reality. Yeah.
thank you for sharing this. While you were speaking about this, you have turned more pink.
Did I turn more pink? Yikes. It's because of the tulips, the red tulips. I'm flashing the tulips like an
and,
octopus. I can change colors.
and the excitement that is so visible on your
Yeah,
face.
thanks.
Uh, so here is another question, which is maybe this is the third generation NLP sort of question and moving towards that. So when NLP began, the focus was not on coaching, or let's say the coaching profession didn't even exist back then. Nobody had that word even didn't exist. Uh, so what developments led to bringing NLP as a methodology into coaching? And who are the real champions of NLP and coaching? I know you and Robert, you do the generative coaching. And what
Robert
was
and
the
Steve, Robert and Steve Gilligan. I've taught it with Judith Lowe because they wanted to see how women would do it. but yeah, I mean, yeah.
So, what were the developments that, well, this is technically a question for Robert, which I will ask him someday. Uh, so, what's your connection there in terms of, what were the developments that finally led to uh, making NLP more mainstream into coaching, which led to generative?
I think again it goes back to that perception from the beginning, because of the sort of therapeutic aspects being focused on, which is more past oriented. or what's happening now in terms of what's the symptom, what's the cause. But there was always the aspect of going, well, what do you want? Right? The NLP question, what is it you really want? Well, I don't want X. I understand you don't want X, but what is the opposite of X? Does that get you closer to what you want? So there was always an emphasis from the beginning on the tote, which is present state, desired state. So, the fact that this idea, and I think maybe I can't speak for Robert, but certainly for myself, from the very beginning, coming from religious studies, I was always so curious in the sense that people go, if I could just get congruent, if I could just be congruent, life will be great. It's like saying, if I get all this stuff done, then I can experience peace. And I would go, that's so odd from my perspective, coming from religious studies and even anthropology, going, why is it that we don't make that first choice to live in the state of grace or find a reference point for being congruent? And then as you move through life, whatever pulls you away is a gift because you go, oh my God, I'm learning, I'm growing, right? As opposed to everything's about the problem, everything's about the problem. So for myself personally, I didn't call it coaching, but was so curious about what is this focus here? Well, it's because everybody's trying to solve something from a problem space, right? That's the problem. So um, I felt like that shift started to happen maybe when um the inner game of tennis.
Tennis. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think that at least I can talk for myself and maybe a little bit for Robert that certainly had a connection. Now, I remember there's a woman named Jan Elfline. I don't know if you've heard of her or not, but she's an extraordinarily amazing coach. And she was doing, I think, her trainer training in NLP. She was already a practitioner and a master trainer. And this was very, very early in the coaching days. And, she had during the trainer training or whatever training it was, could have been, I don't think it was master trainer. I don't think we did that yet. But she had to go do her sort of final assessment as the coach
Mhm.
in the coaching process and then come back. So she came back and I said, how did you do? And she said, they told me I was the best coach that they've ever produced. And I said, well, what do you think that is about? She says, my NLP training. And I go, right on. So I mean, I can't definitely say, but I would say that, it's more like you see this idea. I mean, I grew up with coaches because I danced. Every dancer, no matter how good you are, you have a coach. And they're not just addressing behavioral issues, right? I mean, they are addressing your belief in yourself and, pushing you capability wise. And why are you here if you're really looking at being doing this as to make a living, which I wasn't, I would have starved. But I think that those ideas just sort of went, wow, coaching, well, we have tools for that. Why not? And maybe the
Yeah.
tools are even better. And
Maybe we have better tools in NLP.
well, there's coaching, there's guiding, there's there's teaching, there's
Yeah. Coach to
mentoring,
there is
cons-
coach to awakener.
awakening,
Yeah,
exactly.
awakening. Yeah.
So we go, look, there's, as Robert would say, the big C coach and the little C coach. And also I think what we brought was the somatic influence and the field influence, which was maybe more than was done traditionally, which was more at that time, at least at that time, verbal.
Right, right. So that would be the transition from the first generation of NLP to the second one,
Maybe in between second and third,
second and third.
or then, yeah, yeah. I mean, every one of the descriptions, really supports each other. They sort of together, and I think that's what Robert and I were trying to say in the encyclopedia. They sort of together start to create a field
Mhm.
have yeah.
So I'll just ask a follow-up question, which seems relevant from a perspective of future of NLP. So this is about, so as a co-developer of NLP with almost 50 years of experience of doing NLP,
This year, 50 years,
and
big
50
party.
years. So where do you see NLP going from here? What's the future of NLP, and where do you see what would be the new elements where NLP can be explored? Let's put it this way then.
You know, people ask me this question all the time as well, and the best answer I can come up with is that it'll go wherever you wanna take it. And I think it'll go wherever you look around the world and you see a need for a model, something somebody could use, and you have access to the skills and the tools and the models and the concepts in order to go out and uncover those success elements and to bring something back that is useful for the world. Um, I think there's always gonna be people who are a little bit afraid or ashamed to say what they're doing. I'm doing NLP, and they don't wanna and I know equally as many who will walk into a company and go, "I'm gonna be straight up. This is what I'm doing, and I'm not ashamed of it, and it works," you know? Um, so I think when I go back to the beginning and look at where it is now from where it started, I can only hope that it will continue to develop and that it'll develop with heart and it'll develop with ethics and it'll develop with a sense of wanting to make a contribution as well as make a living. I think that's what my hope is. I see really amazing people out there doing amazing work, making a difference in people's professional lives, in their personal lives, in the overall quality of life. So that I think that's not going to change. Whether it gets absorbed and is not named, I think is a fear for some people. Personally, for me, it's not. It is what it is. If it makes a difference in somebody's life, God bless them.
And this reminded
Did
you
I
know.
answer that question?
Oh, you just answered the question so nicely, and it just brought
Okay,
so
good.
many good memories about the first program that I attended. And I had no idea that eventually, I'll move from a IT cybersecurity happening career to neuro-linguistic programming.
I need you.
And then I happened to attend a coaching program around the same time. And then I was in a dilemma for a while, this is different, that is different. Whatever was done in NLP, the coaching program almost contradicted everything. Maybe it was a poor coaching mentor, I will say, that I attended who had no idea about NLP. Uh, then thankfully, I think I drifted towards NLP, and I
I
sort of I developed that liking. And then my friends were, who had in the beginning no idea, they will say, "What is this NLP or what is this NPL?" They had different names for it. And why are you doing it? Somebody with a master's degree in computer science who's doing cybersecurity is doing really well. What are you doing? And they would end up on the Wikipedia page, which talks about NLP as a pseudoscience. And then I will have to correct, I'll say, well, this is a page which is written by someone who doesn't know NLP and doesn't
well,
and does not
and who
belong to
has
NLP.
and who has an axe to grind?
Yes, absolutely. And then
Absolutely.
then I always give example of, I say, well, Steve Gilligan, who is a PhD from Stanford, if he can say, well, he's NLP and he represents NLP, so can I.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's the only thing you can do. I can't talk for Wikipedia. I know this has been a problem for a long time, and many people have tried to correct that and run into firewalls. That's where it needs cybersecurity. Now,
We need
uh,
to sort of hack that page.
yeah, somebody who sort of made it their mission, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
and that's okay. That's okay. It's gonna happen in any discipline, and it because I think, I don't know, but because I think it's a meta model, people I think they forget that it's a model about models. I think we forget about that. And so when somebody goes, I know how you're thinking,
Mhm.
what they hear is, I know what you're thinking. And nobody knows what another person's thinking. In fact, Todd Epstein used to say, if I go to second position with another person, really, really go into second position, it's probably going to be like being on LSD, because it's going to be such a different map of the world that it's like, holy cannoli. And that's why those presuppositions developed, was because they allowed us to model. Not
Right.
because there aren't times when I go, well, hell, I know I got the right map. We're all going to do that. That's going to be human. But from the aspect of being a modeler, because I have curiosity about some phenomenon. For me, it's with bugs and animals and birds and whales. That's where I go. I'm just crazy about the mind of these other amazing creatures, right? That when we forget that, it gets mushy. It gets mushy. And I think with the coaching, going, well, NLP almost contradicts this and this almost contradicts that you go, this probably has some value, but it's going to be a narrow range value. This has a lot more depth, a lot more richness. It includes the somatic mind. It also includes the field mind. And you go, there's more richness there. And that's the idea ultimately of NLP, is to enrich our maps, right? It's why what we do in anything, whether it's coaching or psychotherapy or somatics or, the five rhythms, that we're trying to enrich and expand our humanness in a way.
Final question.
Ooh,
I think you sort of have.
it's going to be a hard question.
No, this is the easiest one. Uh, so as the flag bearer of NLP, and you still are for almost 50 years, what message do you have for an NLP practitioner who is just starting out?
Who is just starting out? Well, first of all, be a hero on the journey. I would say slow down, pause, breathe, and, enjoy the learning process. Give it to yourself as a gift. When you walk into that room, just settle down and settle in and go, I'm open to learning. I would say, that is key. I would say, as a practitioner, if you come through practitioner class and you have a choice over the quality of the inner world, your inner world, if you come through that class and you can go, I'm the queen of my inner world and I like my kingdom, or I'm the king in my inner world and I like my kingdom, and it's conflict free. And if there is a conflict, I have something I can do, that there's a sense of, a real sense of authenticity and connectedness through that system. The tools, the skills are more important than the techniques. I'd say focus on the skills. Techniques will fail at some point. They always do, because one size doesn't fit all, but your skills will always be there. Get them in the muscle.
Get them in the master, right?
If you're a
Mind to
trainer,
muscle.
don't buy your own hype. That's my
Well, I'm going to add one more question.
okay.
Uh, so what's your message for someone who is uh, getting ready as an NLP trainer and starting uh, as an NLP trainer who's going to be in this profession as an NLP trainer, not somebody else, just for the title?
Well, this is where I'd say, first of all, don't buy your own hype.
Mhm.
you know and what I mean by that is, you know through through the learning process, you're going to have a lot of opportunity in a safe environment to practice, right? You're going to learn skills and you're going to practice those skills, and it's going to be a warm environment, hopefully. and that there
Mhm.
will be feedback in such a way that you can not only correct, but you can grow from it, not have your balloon bursting. Oh, it's not possible, right? I'll never be able to do it. So I think it's really, really important to again just remember to be present to that process. It's like training is going to be like dropping a pebble in a still pond, and you're going to be able to see the ripples, and you're going to learn. When we go outside into the real world, the pond, you got wind blowing, you got leaves falling in the pond. I mean, so you can be ready for that, and have the skills to step in and bring your essence through that role as a trainer. And when I say bring your essence, that means, again, bring your sense of authenticity, that balance between your ego wanting to make a living and your soul wanting to make a contribution, and stay connected. Because I've seen so many trainers through the years become less and less connected to the group they're training because they've taken in, I'm so special.
Mhm. Right.
I'm so special. And they don't get there alone. They don't get there alone. The system colludes
Mm.
to hold them in that space. And I always say it's a dangerous place. It's a dangerous place because people end up getting isolated, lonely, and disconnected from really the joy of bringing news to other human beings that can make a difference. So, and love what you're doing. Love what you're doing. That, yeah, yeah.
Such a lovely answer. Thank you for this. So that brings us to the close of this lovely conversation with Judith DeLozier. And I'm sure the listeners had absolute fun in listening to the NLP way of, now let's
Only hope.
plan and now let's play the and hopefully lot many people will consider to join for NLP programs and learn this absolute brilliant methodology.